Good evening. Alfred, how are you this evening?
I'm very, very well. It's the Monday after Easter 2015, and I feel great.
Super, super. I'm feeling quite fine myself. Uh, this is kind of a little different situation for us. I'm the host on this interview, or more so the host, and you're more so the guest. Usually it's the other way around. But this is kind of a continuation from really the last panel interview that we did, where we had several people that talked about their soul being or their. Why don't you explain exactly how you set it up? Because you were looking for the soul entity, the person within who we are, not just the physical person. And so we all kind of gave an explanation of who we are, where our mission came from. But when it came to yours, where you talked about this, and I had never heard about this before, this put me in the mind of when uh, Saul, the Hebrew Saul, was called by Christ and he was converted to, I will say, Christianity, but really it wasn't. He was drawn in as an ambassador to the kingdom of Christ, or the kingdom on the positive timeline, and if you want to look at it that way. But regardless, it was a one-to-one calling, where this was after Jesus' death that he approached Saul, who became Paul. And there's a lot of similarities in your personal experience with this with how this happened. So what I'd like you to do is just kind of touch your roots a little bit here on where your foundation starts and lead it up to where your inner soul was awakened to, or your interdimensional self.
When I had this multi-dimensional experience.
Yes, and I would just like to add, we live in a 10-dimensional multiverse.
Uh-huh.
We experience the physical, or we are part of the physical three dimensions.
Yeah.
Now, mathematically, the three dimensions in which we live are the largest of the multiverse. And it's interesting that once you break it down, the seven spiritual dimensions and the three physical dimensions, we actually live in dimensions 8, 9, and 10. So regardless of what anyone thinks or believes, we are interdimensional beings as a matter of fact. But very rarely do we ever touch the interdimensional side of who we are. So with that as the premise, your interdimensional self, please.
Yeah, well, what I explained was that this was the whole leading up to it. This was toward the end of 1972, and I was then general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of the city of New York. The mayor was then Mayor John Lindsay, and at that time, I had shoulder-length hair. I had a mustache. It was the late 60s. I'd gotten there in the late 60s. This was the beginning of the 70s, the beginning of the environmental movement. We're going to remake the world. But at the same time, I had been really looking at the positivist paradigm, kind of the 3D paradigm, and seeing that it really didn't contain the whole of the human experience for me at all. Put it that way. And I was reading books like Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, Morning of the Magicians, others which brought science into the issue of whether our time-space reality was really all that there was. So toward the beginning of 1973, my boss, John Lindsay, decided that he wanted to run for president of the U.S., and I didn't really want it to go that way. So I decided that I would go off into a different direction. And I asked around. I asked my cousin, who was my cousin Ann Weber, was a psychotherapist with the Karen Horney Institute in New York. So I asked her if she had, any friends in the who knew anything about parapsychology or that kind of area, in the multi-dimensional area. And I soon was introduced to a man who was a professor of experimental psychology at Rutgers, who was also an expert in parapsychology and in extraterrestrial studies. So we met on the 7th of January of 1973, and that's the year that Nostradamus says is the beginning of the fight of good against evil, quote unquote. It's also the year of Watergate. So it's like all these kind of time sinks come in, right? And I then let go of my job, John Lindsay, all these environment, they go off into their slice of the social fabric. And at the time, my then wife, she was my first wife, Teresa Sevilla, she was an architect from Peru. And we had gotten this loft. We had moved into the Soho area of Manhattan. We had done so at a very early area, so it had moved from an industrial area to artists moving in, and the space that we moved into had been a warehouse of religious objects. So it was filled with these barrels of really beautiful, classic religious objects of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Like we had all these barrels full of cards, these cards of Jesus and everything. And we had to get rid of them. It was terrible to have to throw them out, but there was, they were just in there. So, and then we took over the loft, and she was an architect, so she designed a multi-level, super modern space that was ultimately featured in New York Magazine. And we began to live there. And we had our son, Alfred. I'm a lion of 4 Alfreds. My grandfather was Alfred. My father was Alfred. I'm Alfred. My son's Alfred. I don't know why. That's the way it worked out. And so Teresa went up to Vermont in February, one weekend in February of 1973, to design a ski house, and I was left with Freddie. And by that time, had been working with my colleague. His name was Philip Liss, Dr. Philip Liss, and he had been trained at PhD in MIT, at McGill. It was really like Menke Institute in Warsaw. I mean, it was really like super duper. Had his own UFO experiences. It was really like, and Freddie had gone to bed, and I was in the front of the loft in my studio doing what you do. I was doing my hermeneutics. I was sitting there decoding my biblical prophecy, okay? Which is what Sir Isaac Newton did. I mean, here I was, the month earlier, I was, dealing with 30,000 sanitation men on the EPA, the largest, that budget was larger than the budget of the UN, solid
Sure.
waste, air pollution. Next month, I was dealing with decoding biblical prophecy. I mean, it's like incredible.
Talk about a shift.
Yeah. So, and then right in the middle of that experience, it must have been around midnight or so, all of a sudden, this light, but it's more than a light, it's like a presence comes down around me. And it's like I'm inside this enormous being. That's all I can explain it. It's like this being is completely translucent, and I'm inside it. I'm inside this present. And the objective feeling that I have is that of utter sanctity and sacredness. It's like I'm inside the Holy of Holies. You know, this sort of very holy feeling. And all of a sudden, we start communicating telepathically, but it's like being in communion with a very holy and sacred source. It's not like, you know, telepathy with like, I am from Venus, or, you know, take me to your leader or whatever. It's like really in the spiritual, it's in the holy sense. It's not in the extraterrestrial sense. So we're talking back and forth, and we're getting into this conversation. All of a sudden I say, wait a minute, and who are you? And it says, I am the Holy Spirit. And I mean, all my being went, because in the way that my mind heard it was in terms of the triune God, the Christian triune God. There's God the Father, or God the Mother, God the Son, or God the Daughter, and God the Holy Spirit, right? Mother, Father, God, Son,
Sure.
God.
The Christian concept.
Yeah. And God the Holy Spirit. So like, holy shit, I'm in the presence of God the Holy Spirit. And my grandmother on the Cuban side of my family was from a city in Cuba called Santi Spiritu. So I grew up with a lot of Holy Spirit around me, like if you live in a city called Holy Spirit, well, you're tuned into that,
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So there I was, and we started talking about that, and then back and forth, and then, and then my little Alfred brain goes, and I asked it, and who am I, in this conversation? Why are you talking to me? And it says, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will found my church. And I go, brrr. Because as you know, and you can probably quote chapter and verse because you're a hermeneutics expert, that was what Jesus told Peter, right? Or something like that?
Yeah. But there's a little debate on the exact meaning of what was being talked about there. But yes, Jesus basically turned to Peter and he said, thou art Peter, or you are Peter.
Yeah.
Now the question was whether he was referring to Peter as where he built his rock, or was using Peter as the rock of the church, or himself. There's some debate on that, but it's interesting. Peter was given the, quote, keys to the kingdom.
Right.
Peter was the one that was sent to the Gentile nations. Before that, the message was just held for the Hebrews. It wasn't a message that went out to everyone in the world. So, when you look at the worldwide scheme of things on how, if you want to call it, how Christianity has grown, even though it's no longer in its pure form, because in its pure form, it would have been exopolitical right from the start. It was never religious. It was political. They were all signing on for a future kingdom, for a part in a future kingdom. And that's pretty much what it was a recruiting effort for this. So when you look at the birth of Christianity, you've got Emperor Constantine bringing together the Church of Rome with the different sects of what Christendom had grown into at the time, and making one church, giving Christian names to Roman holidays and calling it one. But the original always stayed within the exopolitical realm. But it's interesting, when we are communicated with something that we identify to. And usually it goes back into our earlier past, or what we believe, what we were taught in our core belief system as children. So,
yeah, exactly. So that, you see, I was incarnated into a very Catholic family, Roman Catholic family, on both sides of the family. On one side, it was a French-American family from Louisiana, that both of my grandparents in New Orleans were married in St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans, and that family, the Webbers, went back to the early 1700s in St. James Parish in Louisiana as very Catholic. I mean, that's
Absolutely
Catholic down there. So
yeah, it doesn't get more than that.
Sorry?
It doesn't get more Catholic than that in the United States.
Yeah. And then on the other side, it was the Chisholms, and the Chisholms were a Canadian family, a Canadian family that emigrated to Boston, and then Everett Chadbourne Chisholm emigrated to Cuba to work to entrepreneur in the sugar industry and met Alfred Weber, and together they formed a partnership, and they constructed about half the sugar mills in Cuba, which were about half the sugar mills in the world at that time.
Wow.
And they got together. This is from the family history. They toasted when my mother was born in Havana. They toasted my mother's birth. Everett Chadbourne Chisholm married a Cuban woman, Juana Fernandez, who I got my DNA. She's of mixed Taino. Taino are the Caribbean Indians. We have Taino blood there, as well as Spanish that came over from Spain, that settled in Spain. And when they toasted my mother's birth at the American Club in Havana. That's how, and they said, wouldn't it be great if my son Alfred and your son Juanita were married? So, of course, they were married, and I'm the eldest of 9 children, but it's all Catholic. And then one of his sons, Chisholm, named Richard Chisholm, became a Jesuit and became the deputy Black Pope under Pedro Arrupe, which they say is the most horrible Black Pope in history, in that he was the one Black Pope that had to be fired because Pope John the 23rd was trying to get rid of the Jesuits and abolish the Jesuits. So Pedro Arrupe put out a contract on Pope John Paul the 23rd, but that's when Pope John Paul the 23rd, there was an assassination attempt, but he survived. So then he survived, and then he fired Arrupe because Arrupe put out the contract on him because he was head of the Jesuits, and John the 23rd was trying to shut down the Jesuits. This is all internecine warfare among all the Jesuit and Vatican Satanists. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
you've got
why
a
did I
class within a class.
into that family? And nobody in the family had any idea that was the Jesuits. They were like porch brethren, believing Catholics. They're just like believing Catholics. They had 9 children.
Mass on Sunday.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I grew up mainly in sugar mills in Cuba, abroad. So I was sent to Catholic boarding schools where I sent to my grandfather's, to my grandparents in Marion, Pennsylvania, where I went to the same Catholic private school that my father went to, where we wore Eton caps, and great little things, taught by the same nuns. And then I went to boarding schools where one of them was a Benedictine school where some of the abbots got kicked out because they did sexual abuse on the children right in the middle of the thing. And I used to get beaten because they would read our letters and I said I was homesick. So it was that typical, satanic, psychotic thing. And
sure, break you down and reprogram you.
Yeah. So it was like that. So you asked me to give some history. So
sure.
I grew up in that bramble bush, and then I went to Yale, and within 2 months I said, fuck Catholicism, man, I'm out of here. And then within 2 months of leaving Yale, I said, fuck Yale, I'm out of here. And, all of these like
Sure.
Illuminati experiences, I just go through them and like boom them off, right? And I went to Yale because my father went to Yale, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but I was told that one of my ancestors, because there's a line of mine that goes back to John Alden that came over in the Mayflower, and I was told that one of my ancestors founded the Yale Divinity School. Okay, so then I just feel like I kind of bounce through these experiences, right? I don't know, and then the reason why I went to Yale Law School is because I had to get out of the fucking Vietnam draft.
Boy, tell me about it.
Yeah, my Yale Law School was like
absolutely
300. It was like 100 yards from the dorm from Timothy Dwight College where I lived. And I walked up one day and I went in and saw the dean, and I said, and I had gotten the highest Yale Law LSAT, Law School Aptitude Test scores on like the Eastern Coast or something. So I walked in, I said, look, I want to go to law school. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. It was bullshit, but I didn't want to go to Vietnam.
What are your choices? Yeah, I know it.
People say, oh, look at him. He went to Yale Law School. Man, we were just trying to stay out of the draft. We didn't want to go genocide because we don't want to participate in genocidal wars.
Sure. I totally understand that. I'm sure you remember the draft lottery.
Yeah.
I had followed it since they initiated it when I was still in the 8th grade. And I was always way, way back in the numbers, so I couldn't tell you. But in my senior year of high school, they ran the draft lottery in January, and I came up number 26 or 28. I got my little card saying, congratulations, son, we're waiting for you. Yeah, I was classified as one holding. The only thing that saved my bacon was that Nixon was in the White House, and he was trying to put an end to the war. And thank goodness he did, because they ended the draft just as I was graduating high school.
I know.
So it was sweating bullets. I was like, do I go to Canada?
No, right. When I graduated law school in '67, I mean, I was facing the draft, and mind you, like some of my law school classmates, these are like they signed up as second lieutenants in the Army, and the life expectancy was like 3 weeks. And this guy who was like top of the class, he was shot out of a helicopter, like he was there for 3 weeks. I didn't feel like getting slaughtered in Rockefeller's War because all that they were doing was bringing back heroin from the Golden Triangle to addict all of the inner city youth. That's what the Vietnam War was all about. And do you know what kept me out of the draft? Okay, so I go to officer candidate school, and I'm there at the interview. This is Navy OCS, and I'm there at the interview. And the guy says, Mr. Weber, you're going to have to order men around. You have a stutter. You're disqualified. My stutter kept me out of the war.
That works.
But then I got a Fulbright down in Uruguay, so I got that out. But look, back to this night. So right after you told me on Peter, then I got kind of lifted up, and I went around, and then it became like if I'd been abducted into a dimensional, like if it became like like a missing time.
Sure.
And like if the loft was a spaceship, but it was missing time. And then I was shown like a movie of my future life. And we were still building the loft. So we had like a table saw there. And on the electric motor, they brought me over to the electric motor, and there was the name the brand name of the electric motor, which was Rockwell, was the name of the electric motor on the table saw, because we used to have to do,
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the rock came up like this, and the well did an optical dissolve. So I just call the rock, and then the well did the. In other words, when the well-being of the earth goes down, the rock shall come to the fore, right?
Sure.
And movies that they show me all night was like the catastrophic timeline, that there was going to be all kinds of stuff to the earth. And so I interpreted that at some point I might have some solutions for the earth, right? But I had just gotten into the whole Alice in Wonderland multidimensional world. So that was my experience. And for years, in fact, I've only, this is really the first intensive time, aside from the panel that I did, I shared little snippets of it in shows now and then over the past year or so. But this is the first time in over 40 years that I've really shared it. I shared it once online, and then I took it off. And I really kept it to myself. But I can date my life before that experience and after that experience. And it's two different things. And it's kind of the inner sort of paradigm that I've carried around. And for me, who had just come right before that, I was inside city government, I was trying to figure things out. And then all of a sudden, okay, this is multidimensional, and I'm on a mission from God, right?
You kind of take it that way.
Yeah.
A little bit hard to ignore.
Yeah.
At that juncture.
But I knew that I couldn't share that with anybody because, next stop is Bellevue, right?
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question here. What year was this?
This was 1973.
Interesting. Because now I do know of some interesting timing events right within the same time period, which go back and link up to biblical history, if you want to call it that. Is not any real prophecy involved. But it was in 1974, a year later, that I had my extraterrestrial experience, and where I was, so it's like, as a matter of fact, I can almost date it. It was the end of May, beginning of June, 1974, where one night I was asleep in my room, and somebody was in my room, and they said, "Look, the prince arrives." And I popped up out of my bed, and I could clearly see someone standing there, but I looked out my window. The bed was facing the window directly. I could see flashing lights outside my backyard, and I'm like, what's going on? And I ran past, or I'm not even sure, maybe even through the person that was there, and I'm looking out the window, and I see this landing craft that looks like a chariot with molded gold horses in it, and there's someone who looks like a prince that's commanding the controls, and there's lights on the bottom and steam coming out and it's landing diagonally toward the other side of the house, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. So I ran around to the other window, and it was gone. And it was after that several times over the course of about a week, I was taken underground someplace. And I never made any connection until actually not long ago when I told you about this. The people that I was connected to, or I was being with, I call them people because they were very human looking. They all had like a monk's robe with very futuristic material where you couldn't see their heads. And we were always underground. There was never a spaceship, never anything like that involved. And they were just a little bit taller than we are. And it finally dawned on me not long ago, could this have been Homo capensis? Because you can never see the back of their heads because of the monk's hood. And everybody, male and female, wore them. Even I was required to have one on when I was with them. So mine is like just kind of the opposite. But here's the interesting thing. I started seeing future events at the age of 9. And that's where the paradox of my life came in. So you went along in one way. I was going along in another way. You had we'll call it an ET event, or a hyperdimensional experience. That's probably the best way to put it, a hyperdimensional experience. in your life, which kind of like redirected you. I was already headed in the right direction because of the education that I was receiving from my early childhood, which was continuing on at this juncture. And that was within learning hermeneutics primarily. But because of what had happened at the age of 9, I started studying science, and I went on to get my degree and go on to be a chemist for 10 years until I got tired of dealing with chemicals, got rid of them. But with my situation, when it ended with a death threat to me. They told me they were going to kill me.
Who?
My new friends underground, Homo capensis, or whoever they were. It was interesting. We were all in a room. It was almost, I don't know if you've ever been to like a chamber. It was like a cocktail party almost without the drinks. And we were all in one room, and people were talking to each other. And someone gets up in the front of the room. They said, can I have your attention? Have everyone's attention. So everyone was quiet. And then he just simply said, we need someone to kill Peter Kling. And it was someone down toward the front that volunteered, said, I'll do it. And I was with my guide here, and I looked at him with dropped jaw. I said, why do they want to kill me? And I was just simply told, because you crossed the line. And it was like, what the hell does that mean? A month later, I was in a motorcycle accident that should have killed me. 2 months later, a month after that, 6 weeks after that, I just bought a new car, new to me. It was a used car, but new to me. It was a Triumph GT6 with wire spoked wheels. Lost the left front wheel off of it and rolled it down a riverbank. Ran out of that car, totaled that one out. Missed the draft, missed the aliens. I was doing okay at 18. So, but that never stopped. It went on, and it got a lot worse as time went on. Especially as I got closer to writing Letters to Earth, those impacts just kept on coming. I'm on life 17. Yeah, I'm on life 17. I should have been dead 16 times. And some of the times I got to meet some very interesting creatures, aliens, life forms. I was in a coma, and being in a coma, my brain would have been cycling in delta, 0 to 4 cycles per second. And while I was in that state, some being, life form, came to me and said, come with me. And the next thing I knew, I was looking down at who was my fiance at the time, giving birth to our child in real time. Wild. Some hours later, I came to, and my mother was standing over me, and first words out of my mouth were, Ma, go make a phone call that the baby was born. Sure enough, I passed out. She came back and told me when I came to again, congratulations, you have a son. So but I got to see the whole thing in real time. And who was that said, come with me? The time that my near-death experience, or my death experience, I was actually, they were wheeling me down a hospital corridor, and I knew I was in trouble, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't move. All I could do was move my eyes. And I saw the ceiling. I saw the people around me, doctors and nurses. I couldn't say a word. And next thing I know, I'm out of my body, watching them wheel me down the hospital corridor. Now everything's in black and white, and my consciousness is enveloped in a white cloudy material, for lack of a better word. I figured ectoplasm, maybe, I don't know. And I was being literally pulled away from my body. And after much protest, because I just got married with kids, starting a new life, and I'm dying here. But I'm literally being pulled away. And when I changed my focus, I said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Where am I going? And I could see I was connected to the great white light, and it was drawing me in. It was like I was in a current being pulled in, and then it stopped, and it reversed, and I was being pushed away, and I was put back in my body. So I guess I got to see the actual dimension of Yahweh outside of the third dimension. But I was returned back to my body, and boy, I got to see all sorts of things during that process once I was back in. The time before last, my favorite is actually, it was right after your interview with Stanley Fulham.
Right.
It was, I think you released the interview on a Monday, It was 10 years. I'm sorry. It was in 2010. It was October 10th, 2010, that this came to me. And this ties in with where we are today, Alfred.
Right.
This was when I found out about the blood moons, all being on Hebrew holidays.
Right.
And there was another, I couldn't figure this one out. 3/13/13. I couldn't figure that one out. Come when 3/13/13 came, that was the day that Pope Francis was elected Pope.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I had foreknowledge of that, but didn't know what the significance of the day was. But I understood the significance, and the whole thing with what Stanley Fulham said lined up with the prophecy that I had found in Ezekiel, which brought me to the 2014 moons or blood moons. And here we are coming up at the end of those blood moons, and the United Nations is getting for their one world government.
Right, and we just saw that now in September of 2015, we're now on the 6th of April of 2015, Bergoglio, Pope Francis, is going to address the UN, right? And he's going to meet with Obama.
First, he meets with Obama on the 23rd. I believe either on the 23rd or the 24th, he's talking to Congress.
Yeah.
He was upstaged by Netanyahu, but he's going to actually speak before Congress. The first time a pope has ever spoken before Congress. And on the 25th, I believe he will be at the United Nations General Assembly. And on the 28th, the General Assembly of the 70th General Assembly of the United Nations ends with the post-2015 development agenda in place on the day of the blood moon, the last of the tetrad blood moons. So, I told you to watch out for these blood moons.
Yeah. So this is what we would call an upper theater extravaganza.
Yes.
You've got, let's just analyze this in terms of upper theater, and then you and I are going to ask each other, why did we go through these experiences back in 73 and 74, and what does it have to do with what's happening now? I mean, why are we coming out with this now? Okay, first of all, we were talking right before the show about the false prophet, the Antichrist, and first of all, I asked you, who is the false prophet? Because everybody's saying, oh, the Pope is going to the UN, he's coming to the White House, he's going to Congress. Is that the false prophet? And you've got all these videos saying he's a false prophet.
No, he's not. Okay. Let's get the players in place.
Okay. First of all, this is called upper theater, right? Okay.
Yes, this is upper theater, and this is out of Revelation chapter 13.
Yeah.
The first thing that it talks about is it's a composite beast, 7 heads, 10 horns. This is the wild beast that ascends out of the sea of turmoil. This was first tried to be put into place by the Rothschilds back in 1814 at the Congress of Vienna. This was to reunite. This was after as the Napoleonic Wars were coming to a close. This was the purpose was to redraw the borders of the countries he had conquered. And so that's the first time that the Rothschilds tried to put this into place. The reason why it failed is because Tsar Alexander I said, you don't own my country, you don't own my banks, you don't have my money, I'm going home, have a good day. But in 1814, most of the world was colonized by Europe. And that lasted up until 100 years later. 1914, well, let's step back a year. 1913, the Rothschilds, after being kicked out of the United States twice, reestablished their bank as the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And so the Federal Reserve, or the central banking system, came into play. So what do we have next is the First World War. At the end of the First World War, what do we get? We get the League of Nations, which, although Woodrow Wilson actually wrote the charter for the League of Nations and tried to get Congress to join, Congress wouldn't join. They perceived it as a European club. And considering that it was the end of World War I was just over, we got our nose bloodied for no good reason. And it was Europe's problem. It was adios, so long, goodbye. So we needed a couple more events. We needed the capturing of the gold of the people of the United States through FDR in 1933, which financed essentially World War II, where now we had a death stroke to the League of Nations, but it comes back as the United Nations. So when we look at this seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast, it gets this death stroke. It comes to power, it gets a death stroke, and then it recovers, and it comes back stronger. It comes back as the United Nations. So there is the seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast. Seven heads, seven world powers. 10 horns, the seven world powers being Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and the United States and American dual world power. The seven horns are the seven kingdoms that ran that. Medo-Persia gets 2, Rome gets 2, one for Rome, one for Constantinople, and the United States and England each get a horn. Horns represent government. Whenever there is a beast that is mentioned within the entire Bible, and it talks about horns, the horns are part of the government, or they represent governmental power. So now we've identified this wild beast as the current United Nations. It talks about a false prophet, a peaceful lamb, 2-horned wild beast that looks like a lamb, peaceful lamb, but speaks like a dragon. What do dragons speak? Fire. When you read the account, it says that it was given power to the false prophet to call fire down from the heavens and perform great signs, like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Dresden, Tokyo, all burned to the ground, the first 2 with nuclear fire. So we see the false prophet. Now, interesting, when you look at the creation of the state of Israel, it was both England and the United States that were instrumental in creating the state of Israel for the Rothschild family, both through war and through dictate. The Balfour Agreement, which became the Balfour Declaration, is pretty much the start. But when you go back to 1897, we get the first Congress of Zion, which was supposed to originally be held in Munich, Germany, until the local Hebrew population found out that the purpose for the meeting of the first Congress of Zion was to relocate Jews to Palestine. It was such an uproar that they had to relocate their Congress to Basel, Switzerland. So that's where the foundation was being laid to procure the Middle East and turn Israel or Palestine back into a Zionist country in order to rebuild Solomon's temple and force the coming of the Messiah. So they were laying all this groundwork, but it takes these beasts. Now here we come to the image of the wild beast. It talks about this false prophet as making an image to the wild beast, and it breathes life into the image of the wild beast, and the image puts under compulsion all of mankind to serve it. And those who do not serve the image of, no longer the wild beast, but the image of the wild beast, all those who do not serve this image are put to death. And if you do not take the mark, then you can neither buy nor sell. So now this sounds very ominous and very doomful. Well, guess what? If there's a UPC code on something, it's already carrying the 666. The first 2, the last 2, middle 2, and the last 2 lines on a UPC code are 666. Years ago, if you find an old UPC code, they'll still have the little 6s down under those lines. But they eradicated them once people figured out that they meant 666, that they were the master code for the UPC item. So we can really neither buy nor sell unless you have a UPC code now, and you can turn around and say, well, technically that's the mark of the beast. Well, if they have a reevaluation of money and come out with a one world currency and end poverty and end the debt system like they want to in the post 2015 development agenda. Well, in order to get your fair share of that dragon family gold, you might have to sign a loyalty agreement and take a pledge of allegiance and a chip. Be put into the computer, become part of the grand society. So that is very much their agenda. Will it happen? The prophecies are yet to be fulfilled. Now, here's an interesting thing. When the Pope comes to the United Nations in September, he will be starting the prophecy of Revelation 17, where the harlot is riding the scarlet-colored wild beast. So there's another point of hermeneutics.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Pope really isn't the false prophet, but he's the harlot.
The harlot, yes. And what does the Pope want to do? Have a one world religion. Have the Vatican represent all religions. So read about the harlot, and that is the prophecy against the church. All religion. You see, it's not religious. It's political. I keep on saying that. It's political. Exopolitical,
right?
Upper theater. And so people are easily fooled by being sucked into the religious nature of what the Bible says. But all the holidays are tied right back to the ancient Roman holidays, which go back to the Anunnaki and the ancient Sumerians. That's where it all originates from. So it's ET involvement, regardless if you want to follow the Anunnaki story. It's ET involvement, whether you want to follow the biblical story. But the biblical story is based on a more accurate description because the seven the seven heavenly numbers, or the seven spiritual numbers, the seven spiritually complete numbers of God. It's seven. His number is 7. His number is actually 0. The 0 dimension, which created the 7 spatial planes and the 3-dimensional planes in which we live in, the 8th, 9th, and 10th dimensions. So, folks, if you're going to ascend to the 5th dimension, I'm not sure where you think you're going to go. However,
now
we have an Earth here to fix.
Right. So now we've covered the false prophet. We covered the harlot coming up. Now, what's the Antichrist?
The Antichrist is, when we look, here's the thing. It's a scarlet-colored 7-horned wild beast.
Yeah.
Why does the beast keep on changing? Kind of has different missions. Scarlet is the color of royalty. 7 heads, again, 7 world powers. 10 horns, interestingly enough, 10 crowned heads of Europe who are in direct submission or subjection to the Vatican, including the Queen herself, who is a Dame of Malta and subject to the Pope. So regardless whether she's head of the Anglican Church or not, she's still a subject to the Pope. And by the way, all religions are corporations, and therefore beholding to the mother of all corporations, which again is the Vatican or the Holy See, Inc. So all roads currently lead to Rome. So what do you have to do? Get rid of Rome. And so here's where, when you look at the protocol, they want to end God, destroy religion. It's written right there in the protocol. And they talk about installing their king. So who is the Antichrist? Revelation 3:9. Those from the synagogue of Satan who claim to be Jews and are not, but are lying. Look, I will make them come before you and do obeisance to show you them that I have loved you. So there's the Antichrist, the synagogue of Satan. Who's the synagogue of Satan? Who are the Molech worshippers? Who supports the Molech worshippers? Christians for Zion. Aren't they a bunch of brainwashed lots? What happens when religion ends? So you see, here's the thing. We might see a totalitarian worldwide government and with a one king. Who's the most eligible king? Although Charles may be next in line, William, born on the 21st of June on the summer solstice at 2100 hours, is most definitely the most desired one. And even within the protocol itself, they give themselves liberty to step over those who might be closer in line to get to those more qualified to make their king. This can all be found within the protocol of Learned Elders of Zion, or Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. So that's the upper theater that's playing. What do we see here on Earth? We see banking problems. We see ISIS. We see Netanyahu not happy with peace in the Middle East. You know, we've got a peace deal, or at least an arms deal that's workable with Iran, but Israel's not happy with it. Why? Why hasn't ISIS ever attacked a location in Israel? Think about it.
Because that's their headquarters.
Hello, world. Yeah, you see, that's the multi-dimension is playing out on the physical, and now we see the upper universe, as you put it, Alfred, very good. The upper universe in what is happening in September is now starting to play out with the harlot riding the wild beast. Think about that.
That's a wild picture.
Yeah.
A harlot riding the wild beast.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see a good cartoonist do that one.
I was 8 years old when I learned about that.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 8 years old. Hold on. I've actually got a book where it's in, where that information is in. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, Peter, 8 years old.
Yep.
Wow.
And there's an interesting. It's a 600-page book, and there's a chapter entitled in it, "From the Euphrates to Armageddon." Interesting, from the Euphrates to Armageddon, and chapter, as I had said, chapter 16 of Revelation has been fulfilled. That was fulfilled in September with the United Nations Declaration to end extremism in religion or anywhere else, end extremism, and sending another, for the third time, a coalition of troops back to the Middle East, back to Iraq.
So what are people like you and I who've had these really bizarre, I just want to call them bizarre, these like amazing experiences where you have gone up to the dimension of Yahweh. I've had the Holy Spirit come down upon me. I just want to say for a while, I mean, as a disclaimer, that I have, and I'm going to be publishing a book called Journeys, which is episodes that I've had like this, okay? And this particular episode, I mean, I still don't know what it is, because I say, oh, maybe that's voice to skulls, some kind of weird, maybe that's the Greys and the Dracos that came in like, maybe that was, because ETs, they're pranksters, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Pranksters. They just totally pranked me. They just thought, oh man, this guy grew up Catholic. They just pranked the koozie out of him and make him think, and put him on, because all contactees, once you get into exopolitics and the study of contactees, you realize that typically when they meet with contactees, they give them a lifelong mission, him or her.
Sure.
They just give, so it's typically like that. Or, some people say, oh, that was just a dissociated part of your subconscious. So there's all these hypotheticals. And then, hey, maybe it was the Holy Spirit meeting with Peter. I mean, all these different things, you know what I'm saying? So, So the way that I've taken it, is like, okay, I'm going to take this as a hypothesis, but the way that I've taken it is that, okay, I'm going to take this as, it's sort of Kundalini rising, my kind of spiritual emergence experience, and what I'm going to do is during my life, I'm going to act as though it says, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I'll found my church." I'm going to act as a rock spiritually, and I'm going to try and, be something of a foundation so I can, people. So most of my life I've been a alternative media, so I can showcase people, which I've done all of my life. I've showcased people, I've showcased causes. I was counsel in the Panther 21 trial in New York in 1969, where the FBI tried to set up the Black Panthers, who were really a community organization to try and do something for the African Americans. And the FBI tried to set them up that they were going to blow up the Statue of Liberty. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I have tried to act that way as kind of the, let me try and kind of balance everything, and sort of be that way. And let me try and expose these other guys who I see as essentially ripoffs. They're just trying to rip off the spiritual energy by imposing a false matrix.
How would you say this one incident set the course for your life? I can remember the one thing that created a paradox in mine was when I had that dream at 9 years old that I actually had come true. And that caused me to go down a road of science to explain the scriptures, which ultimately I did, and that just added to my mission. But in your case, it was a little different. It was a much different calling than my extraterrestrial involvement. That mine was a means to derail. But how did this one incident shape what became Alfred Weber?
Everything. Look, on the one hand, I'm a lawyer. I was trained as an international lawyer. I worked in the most advanced international law firm in the world at the time. I was a professor of international law. I specialized in international law, taught at 2 universities. And so it translated into, when I went into praxis, which is theory and practice, I thought of myself as the manifestation in 3D of other dimensions. And I said to myself, all of a sudden, because I had helped Henry B. Gonzalez start give me a chance to kind of roll out how my mind worked. So, wow, this gets really complex. I don't know.
Yeah, when you start thinking about how this comes together, it's like, wait a minute, it becomes a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, it becomes a Rubik's Cube. So one of the theories that we developed in our first book, called The Age of Cataclysm, was a theory that, in essence, UFO encounters are communications from higher intelligent civilizations to our own. And in a way, they're like symbolic communications. They're like they're like what your unconscious does in a dream. In other words, if you look at the theory of dreams, normal dreams, not dream warfare or anything like that, but in a normal dream, your unconscious will communicate to you in a symbolic way. and is trying to tell you something, right?
Sure.
In that same way, we call it, I call it the context communication theory of extraterrestrial communication, so that every UFO encounter in a way is like a dream, in the sense that it is composed as a dream. It's composed. They're symbolic communications to be decoded, right? And if you decode them, they'll tell you more about the larger context, like the UFOs encounters at God-Man Air Force Base, right? God-Man Air Force Base. That's a simple the context communication. Why would the ETs choose God-Man Air Force Base? Is to get you thinking about God-Man. Well, there was one ET encounter called the Kelly Hopkinsville ET encounter, and in that one, there's this bullet that turns inside out. Okay, there's a bullet that turns inside out. So, what's the essence of the John F. Kennedy assassination cover-up? It's the magic bullet theory, which is proposed by another Yale Law graduate, Illuminati skull and bones grunt, Gerald Ford, who was a cover-up artist both in John F. Kennedy and in the UFO field. So if you look at, we were analyzing the UFO encounter called Kelly Hopkinsville, and the bullet turns inside out. So this was back in 1973, where they wouldn't allow you to publish on John F. Kennedy assassination. It was a coup d'etat. So in my first book, what we did is we snuck in a whole section on the Kennedy assassination with G.P. Putnam's in the galleys. They sent us the galleys, then we snuck it in, and then they printed it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, you had to do shit like that back in those days.
Sure.
That people just don't understand what the underground in the Matrix what was like. Everybody now is, they don't understand like life in the Matrix back then. And so we got the first thing on the Kennedy assassination out there. Why? Because we understood that if we turned the magic bullet theory inside out, we would turn the whole Matrix inside out, right?
Sure.
Because the Rothschilds had come in and shut down the whole of the planet on the Kennedy assassination, because the Kennedy assassination was what we call deep space warfare, where Kennedy had come in. He was a soul that had come in from deep space, and then they took him out in order to take over the planet again. So, from a soul point of view. So, that's how we had ET encounters inform political strategy. Out of that, I published that and then started activism. And then Representative Henry Gonzalez contacted me and invited me down to Washington. And we got, one thing led to another. And we got the House Select Committee on Assassination started. So I went down there and we worked with the Black Caucus, the widow of Martin Luther King, Mrs. Martin Luther King, and we got the House Select Committee on Assassination started. While I was down there, Jimmy Carter had just been elected president on a UFO platform. He said, if I get elected president, because some activists had asked him, his opponent was Gerald Ford, who was both the JFK cover-up and the UFO cover-up. And both things were linked because JFK was killed because he was going to, he was going to open up the whole UFO issue. And so Jimmy Carter said, if I get elected, I'm going to open up the UFO file. So then and there, I I made up my mind that if Jimmy Carter got elected, I'm going to do something with Jimmy Carter. And in fact, I ended up being director of the proposed Jimmy Carter extraterrestrial communication study of the Carter White House in 1977. And the way that I got there was that Jimmy Carter had just been elected. It was the transition party period. And I was contacted by a lawyer from Atlanta, a very prominent man, who said that he was associated with Jimmy Carter and that he was an emissary to the House Select Committee on Assassination. So then he invited me one night. I was down in Washington to a dinner up on Capitol Hill, and I ended up with what they call the 12 Apostles. It was JC and the 12 Apostles, Jimmy Carter and the 12 Apostles. And that's what they called themselves, because he was a peanut farmer.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, David Rockefeller, probably because he had used his chronovisor, his private chronovisor, because Nostradamus had a chronovisor. That's how he saw that stuff. And knew that Jimmy Carter was going to be president, and then gave Jimmy Carter the Rockefeller plane, and then he became president. So, and that's when the original guys that started with Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer, who was a UFO contactee, going back to 1969, when they were going into a meeting where this UFO, as bright as the moon, was over these club members, of Jimmy Carter. I mean, and I have a paper showing that with John Kelly of newsandsetlife.com, that Jimmy Carter was probably a UFO abductee also. He was taken up there and he was debriefed. He doesn't remember it, but he has all the hallmarks of being a UFO abductee, not just a contactee. So he was probably debriefed in the ship that he's going to be a UFO thing. And that's why when you have the picture of the presidents, you'll see all the dark force presidents of Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Clinton, and Obama, the four of them over there, and Jimmy Carter's over here, because he's of the light and the other four are of the dark. They're in two different groups. But people don't normally see that. That's how that's divided. And that's because those four are the dark force, and he's the only abductee. Now, let me just continue with this. So then they invited me up to that thing, and I was sitting there, and they all called Jimmy Carter, who was then the elected president. This was in the interim. They called him Peanut. So I said, "Oh yeah, you're going to work for Peanut." And so I was sitting there where all of a sudden I've been drawn into the inner sanctum, right? And it occurred to me, what I want to do is I want to come to Washington and I want to found the first civilian light, starseed-led extraterrestrial study. Because all of them I knew up until that time had been military-led by the Dark Force, who were under contract with the Dark ETs. So that's where this whole thing got started, and what the connection from the John F. Kennedy assassination, which I had been working with Representative Gonzalez and then that's what got me into that meeting. And then leaving there, I went out to the West Coast, met with Putoff and Targ at SRI. They referred me to Peter Schwartz at the Futurist thing. I interviewed there. I said, look, I have connections at Jimmy Carter White House. I want to do an extraterrestrial study. They said, come on board. And I became Thing of the Futurist with the understanding that I would pursue a contract research at the Jimmy Carter White House on ETs. And then as soon as I got back in, I did that. I connected, and then we started until in October of 1977, the Pentagon came in and shut us down and said, even though the White House had approved it, if this contract goes forward, we are terminating all Pentagon studies contracts with SRI, which is 25% of their budget. Like 25 million out of $100 million budget, SRI would have tanked and gone down. So my little contract got knocked out. And immediately they did that. I was targeted with EMF. I was targeted with EMF at the inner ring of the Pentagon, the E ring, while I was meeting with the Assistant Secretary of Defense. And they did all kinds of mind games on me. That secretary pulled up this newspaper, and the back of it had sex. And then they brought in Men in Black. I was attacked with Men in Black and simultaneously with EMF. And I was like a Jedi Knight with my tennis racket. I brought a tennis racket to Washington, and I just like, but anyway, so that was back then, right? And so that's like, it's been that kind of life that I've led for over 40 years. And I got prepared on it by the Holy Spirit entity, whatever that was, it was probably one of your immortals, preparing me, maybe whoever it was, preparing me for, over 40 years of combat with these Matrix characters and these Men in Blacks and all these other characters who are trying to keep the Earth inside a dark matrix, which is their time's up now. They're gone. They're out of here.
40 years of combat. Isn't that the truth?
It is. It's been 40 years of combat.
I agree. It's like, yeah, for me, 40 years. This will be 41.
Yeah. For me, 1973 to 2015 is 42 years of combat.
Yeah. So, and mine started in 74.
41 years of combat.
Yeah. And people, that's a wild thing, Alfred. And I hope that people can understand this. We didn't just wake up yesterday.
Yeah.
We've dedicated our lives to understanding this and doing our best to educate people, looking at the dynamics from all sides. And without a doubt, we are at this crossroads right now. And it's like, I can follow it with biblical prophecy. It's like, that one's done, just flicking them right by. Okay, where are we now?
Right.
We know exactly where we are. In September, we will be we're in transition. There's actually a lot of different prophecies going on. But in September, we will clearly be starting the ride, if you want, of the Whore of Babylon on the back of the scarlet-colored wild beast.
Wow, the ride of the Whore of Babylon on the back of the wild beast. So that's Bergoglio, who's riding the Anglo-American Empire. Well, then why is he playing footsie?
It's right. No, the wild beast is the United Nations.
Oh, the UN.
Controlling the world situation.
Oh, so that the Vatican's riding the UN.
Yeah.
Now, why is he playing footsie with China and Putin and BRICS and AIIB or whatever it is?
Follow the money.
I see.
Okay. Look at it from, you'll appreciate this. Why does the Knights Templar, their symbol, why does it have two riders on one horse? The official story is that they were such a poor order that they had to double up on their horses. That's the official story. They came from a very poor order of knights. Knights weren't poor. Okay. Now, take a guess what... I've got a theory for this, but you've got two riders on one horse. And what did the Knights Templar do? They invented our modern day banking system. So who's in control of the banking system? The Zionists and the Jesuits. We know that the Zionists were one of the riders in the Knights Templar. How did they know to go back to Jerusalem and start digging unless they knew that their ancestors buried something there? They had to be Jewish. And it wasn't the Ark of the Covenant. That disappeared before Babylon sacked the city in back around 600 BC. So it was knowledge. It was all the sacred writings of the Kabbalah, and it was no doubt a nice stipend in order to get going. They took 93. General Titus took 93,000 captive of that class, which were the leading or the ruling class, which the disciple Stephen in Acts the 7th chapter, the 42nd and 43rd verse, identified as Egyptian Molech worshippers.
So what you're saying is that the Antichrist is really the Moloch worshippers, which is the Zionists and the Jesuits.
Dates all the way back to Egypt. But now here's the thing. Financially, the dollar's in trouble. The Rothschild cabal and all their buddies have sucked up as much gold as they can out of the West. They're controlling it. Even Germany has to wait 7 years to get their gold. It's probably 4 years now. But they think they're going to be hit with it's going to take them longer than that, but that's regardless. So now where's the next gold? The dragon families in the East.
I see.
You see, it was Karen Udis that kind of put me wise to this. She said that the Jesuits had a stranglehold on the banking system in China. Really? The Jesuits are controlling that. Okay. So, and then we've heard we've heard about this dragon family gold going to save the world now for what, almost 4 or 5 years, that they're supposed to change the paradigm of everything. And so now we see everybody running to the AIIB that's newly developed by China, one of the dragon countries. So this has another switch around on the multi-dimensional theater and prophecy as the King of the North and the King of the South battling back and forth.
Now who's the King of the North and the King of the South?
Now the King of the North would be China and Russia. The King of the South would be the Western countries. So we've got games within games that are being played out. And the fact is that right now on the ET interdimensional level, they're having their own problems because you've got the group that's working with the military that wants to just scuttle the earth, and the other group that's trying to sue for peace, so to speak, and not face total annihilation when the King of Kings and Lord of Lords shows up. So, here we are. And this takes us into, I guess, maybe our last section here. The positive timeline. We look at it totally, I think, from different viewpoints, but we both agree we are on a positive timeline. I think when you look at the biblical prophecy, we're going to face some sort of Nibiru event, which is going to cause humanity to split. And there's other prophecies that would support this. Malachi 4:1 and 2 comes to mind. It says, the day is coming that is burning like the sun, and the presumptuous and the wicked will become like chaff, and they will be burned up, and there will neither be root nor bough left to them. But to those of you who respect my name, the Son, S-U-N, with healing, Son of Righteousness, with healing in its wings, will make you strong, and you will go forth like young fattened calves who paw the ground. So how do you have one event destroy one group, the wicked and the presumptuous, but those who are spiritually aligned, it makes them strong? The only way to explain this is the dimensions that we would face when we are either in beta or in alpha.
Right. There's a dimensional stratification.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. The beta, and these are actually operating speeds of the brain. When we are in a frightened situation, we need to be in beta to be frightened. And fear is just what happens here, how we translate something. And we usually translate it illogically based on events which have not happened. Usually if an event's happening, you don't have time to be afraid, you have time to react. So don't worry about what you're afraid of. Have time to just be prepared for things that you might have to react to. It's very simple. If you don't live in fear, you won't be in that fight and flight state. when we make the shift to alpha, alpha is where we do strategic thinking. It's where we meditate. It's where we pray. It's where we sit down, have a cup of coffee, think about, oh boy, I need a vacation. Where do I want to go? You're an alpha. When you pray, you communicate. Now, this is what's different between prayer and meditation. When you pray, if you are praying to the zero dimension, the Creator, the Father, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Jehovah, however you want to pronunciate it in your language, it's still the zero creative dimension that we are connected to. It's not some old man who floats around on a cloud and likes to listen to harp music. It's a dimension, an intelligent dimension. And it drives everything. Here's an interesting thing. We talked to backstep. We talked about the male and female components of God. The male component is the zero dimension, Yahuwah. The female components are the other 10. The seed within the ovum, or the sperm within the ovum. And it's the sperm which creates the other 10 dimensions. Hence, we have God particles at the subatomic level. So there is the difference. The father starts the life. The mother cares for the life. And so we have the whole multiverse, which is the feminine, the 7 dimensions to the 0 dimensions, fertilization or spark of life.
Now, there are kind of 3 questions which come up for me. And I kind of want to pursue them all. You know, you're supposed to be interviewing me, and now I'm interviewing you. So I don't know where.
Well, let's go.
This is going.
Let's go back to the timeline. Okay, I want to go back to the positive timeline. So let's stay there.
Hold on. Yeah. Here's the thing. See, to me, Nibiru's a red herring because the dimensional stratification could take place without an external event. You just have a dimensional stratification, and the people who with hate in their heart can't take the frequency, and they just go, and they get transported off to some other place. Okay, so number 1. But what I'm really curious about is this. Supposedly, according to one view, we're in 2015 now, and we have this countdown coming in September of 2015, where the upper theater events. You know, I'm getting my popcorn out, getting my popcorn hit on.
It's going to be entertaining.
Yeah. Okay, and there's supposed to be a 7-year period, right?
Oh, that's what they say, but they
that's what they say. Let's say September 2015. Let's just call it September 2022, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's go through that. Let's walk. I mean, I know that you and I have been walking through this. You know, we started out we identified Prince William. You remember that as the future king, and we released that on the very day that Prince William, after his wedding, landed here in Canada, which is where they first rolled him out, and then he went down to Hollywood and he disappeared into Bohemian Grove, where
more than likely
probably did ritual sacrifice on a bunch of babies, and they drank a bunch of blood with all those people. And then he reappeared again and went back to England. I mean, that's probably what happened. So the thing is this. So we've been tracking this now for a while. So let's start out with September 2015. The Pope goes to the UN. The Pope goes to Washington. The Pope goes to the Congress. The Yahoo was there before. You know, the Yahoo is part of the Synagogue of Satan. He's part of the Satanists. He's part of the Antichrist. The Pope now, so the U.S. Congress is entertaining the Antichrist. Now it's going to entertain the whore on the whore's way up to the UN. What's the UN? I forget all these parts that they're playing.
seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast.
Yeah,
Seven-headed, seven heads
right,
for the
riding the wild beast.
yeah.
Okay, so let's start out with September 2015, and let's really go through. We've got almost almost 40 minutes left here. Let's go all the way through to September 2022 and do our best job. I mean, so that we can, in September 2022, we can look back and say, well, how good did we do?
Alfred, I think September 2022 we'll be well on our way to rebuilding.
Rebuilding.
I don't think it's going to take that long. The whole 7.5 years, or 7 years rather, is here's the issue. That there's actually two issues with that number. Number one, you don't know where it begins.
Uh-huh.
Number two, it's already had an application back in Jesus' day. It was split into two parts.
Well, wait a minute. You went really fast there, and I missed that.
It was originally applied it was applied to the Messiah. And it's actually, boy, this is 3 different levels of application, and interestingly enough, it ties into the year 1914 quite nicely. However, we got the First World War in 1914, and that was, every historian will tell you 1914 was a change in history. The Rothschild cabal came to power in 1914 and gained its foothold, and we've been under the League of Nations / United Nations / coming one world government by the same group. But when we look at what their goal is, it's a development plan. It's a plan to enable people. It's a plan to use resources more wisely. It's a plan of sustainability. It's a plan to end poverty. The UN plan is they've taken the best brains, they've done the best studies, and they've come up with the best ideas, and they've used people from all around the world, and this has been going on for several years. This isn't just something that they dreamed up yesterday. They've been working on this. So when do they start working on it? I don't know, but they're adopting it. To apply that 7 years in one location is difficult to do. But what we can do is go back to 1914 and look at how long it took them to bring about the League of Nations. So you got a period of 5 years. There's one major caveat in this, and it comes out of, regardless, I think that we actually started the countdown last September 2014, number one.
September, because that would be 100 years from 1914.
Yes, not only that, but they also, for the third time, when you read Revelation 16, 12 through 17, it talks about the angel pouring out his bowl of anger upon the waters of the Euphrates and them being dried up, making way for the kings of the rising of the sun, east. So since we have seen 3 times, we've seen war in Iraq, and now with the third time, we see the emergence of the AIIB as well as BRICS. You know, we see power coming out of the east. And so when you continue to read it, this prophecy involves the great dragon, the off-planet entity. It involves the 7-headed, 10-horned wild beast. It involves the false prophet, the United States and England. And it talks about 3 frog-like expressions of war that they are all in agreement with. So this actually it's to bring the nations together. So for the third time, we had the third expression of war last year in September by the United Nations. That's why I said that's an important date. So that started a clock. That fulfilled chapter 16. This September starts chapter 17, the whore riding the wild beast. Now, here's the thing, Alfred. When you read chapter 17, it says that an eighth king emerges from the other seven, and its sole purpose is to destroy the harlot. It has been put into its heart to destroy the harlot. So we're gonna watch some sort of rollout, and the Pope is going to be supporting everything that the United Nations is doing. And then you can pretty much guess that somewhere toward the middle to the end of next year, we're going to say goodbye to religion. And it could come in the way of disclosure. It could be an ET event, Project Bluebeam. You want to change this world? Listen to what Ronald Reagan foretold before the United Nations. He said nothing would change this world faster. He said, how fast would we put aside our differences if we were facing an ET, aliens from off Earth? He said, we put our differences aside quickly.
So what they're going to do is they're going to time disclosure somewhere in 2016.
End of 2015, beginning of 2016 would be most logical.
End of 2015, beginning of 2016, and that's going to be to be the end of religion as per chapter 17 of the book of Revelation.
Yeah, and it may not be, here's the thing, we're also talking about extremism. That's just one caveat.
Yeah.
We're also talking about the fact that the United Nations has everything it needs legally in place to end really most religions. When you look at the United Nations Declaration on Freedom of Religion, I believe it's Article 2.1, it says that everyone has the right to freedom, to their way of religion, their way of freedom to choose how they want to worship, provided that it is not a hazard to public safety.
Right.
You got somebody yelling Allah Akbar and with a bomb strapped on their back, and they run in and they push a button and they just kill a whole bunch of people in a cafe. I would say that is a hazard to public safety.
Right.
So would you leave a young child with your local parish priest to babysit while you went to the movies with your husband? Probably not. It's like the church has got the reputation of being a bunch of pedophiles. So again, a hazard to public safety. The United Nations has legal rights to end both of them.
Right.
So it does not need an alien invasion. All it needs is extreme belief systems.
Right.
So
Now,
it's kind of like Wizard of Oz, that he's turning all the knobs, pulling the levers, and you're watching, flames shoot up and smoke and fire billow, but you don't know what lever he's pulling, to make what happen. And they've got a lot of options to do.
Okay.
Something's going to bring the end of religion, freedom as we know it.
What I'm thinking is this. We have this 7 period, we're now a year into it. What are the major milestones that we should expect in this period? One milestone is the end of religion, which may or may not be through an ET disclosure or false flag or, Operation Blue Beam or something.
Sure. They have lots of options.
Yeah.
The scripture doesn't say how, but it identifies the 8th king, and the 8th king will be established in September. You see, that's the important thing. That 8th king in Revelation chapter 17 is established with this new post-2015.
And the 8th king is what exactly?
The 8th king actually brings about the actions of the Antichrist, which turn on religion.
I see.
I can turn to it rather quickly here and actually.
Okay.
It talks the 8th king, the 7 kings are the 7 world empires. That the seventh one being the Anglo-American dual world power. Then it talks about an eighth king being formed, and this is where everybody turns around and gives support to this post 2015 agenda. All nations are buying into this. That's why the Pope's there as well, and all this has been hammered out. It goes on in Revelation chapter 17:12. It says the 10 horns that you saw mean 10 kings, 10 crowned heads of Europe, and who are under the control of the Vatican. So out of the strongest crowned head, we have both William and Charles, more so William than Charles, waiting in the wings to take strength of this. Let me just go, let's see. It says the 10 horns who you saw, 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. They're under the rule of the Vatican. It says, but they will receive authority as kings 1 hour with the wild beast. These have one thought, so they give their power and authority to the wild beast. These do battle with the Lamb. Hold on, that was not what I was looking for at this moment. That's where they all come together. Got to back up. It actually starts in verse 9, and where it talks about the 7 kings having fallen. One is, the other has not and yet arrived, but when he does arrive, this is from Revelation 17:10. When he does arrive, he must remain a short while. And the wild beast that was but is not, that is also an 8th king. This is talking about now moving to the scarlet-colored wild beast. But springs from the other 7. So this is the world powers, the 7 world powers that are coming together as an 8th king, or that are forming this image or this other beast that we see, which is established in this year at their 70th summit here in the United Nations, 70th General Assembly.
Right. Now, I'm going to keep us moving because I don't want to run out of time. Sure. So what's the next milestone after the 8th king?
Some sort of Nibiru event.
Now, you keep on saying...
When I say Nibiru event, let's look at it. Let's clarify.
Yeah, can you come up with another word than Nibiru event? Because...
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift. Okay, we can all get behind that one.
We're going to have a paradigm shift. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, you know something? I think you just hit it out of the park.
Well, here's the thing that comes during the paradigm shift. You have to remove the evil. You have to remove the ETs that have been working with the military. You have to remove the military. You have to remove this evil power structure. And I don't care whether it's the king of the north or king of the south. It has to be removed, and it has to be removed on the 3-dimensional level and on the interdimensional or on the upper theater level.
Yeah.
It all has to be removed.
Right.
We cannot continue until that is removed.
Right. And that can be removed through a dimensional shift.
It can be. Now,
So it's a paradigm shift. That is, a paradigm shift scientifically is more accurate, because a Nibiru event, you're just saying one case. A paradigm shift leaves open, I think, is a more scientifically accurate, because you don't know what it's going to be.
Well,
so I applaud you for shifting yourself and shifting into paradigm shift. I applaud you, Peter. Finally, great.
The paradigm shift has always been there. I've talked about it for quite a while, Alfred.
I know, but
around this
you're letting go of Nibiru event, shifting into paradigm shift.
It actually is.
That, I think.
Yeah, it actually is, and something will happen. Exactly what will happen, I don't know. But it's recorded at Revelation 6:12 through 17, and this event causes the world leaders to scurry to their underground military bunkers or their underground cities. It's that type of impact which causes them to go underground. Now, guess what? If they're all underground, who's left up top? Problem solved.
You know,
If Homo capensis is underground and they're underground, you just
yeah,
annihilate everyone underground.
maybe the paradigm shift is nothing more than the uncloaking of the combined galactic fleet. That's what I think.
It could very well be. What happens when you read the actual verse? It comes down Revelation chapter 6 verses 12 through 17. It talks about the blood being turned to moon. First it starts off with a great earthquake. That's where you want to be, underground during a great earth-shattering earthquake. But a great earthquake occurs, and the moon becomes as blood. The sun becomes darkened. It says that the stars fall from heaven like like when a great wind blows the unripe figs off of a tree. The mountain groups and the island groups in the mountains themselves will be done away with. It's got all this doom and gloom, and it says that the kings and the mighty men and all of their servants essentially go hide underground. And it says, but who can hide from the wrath of the one seated upon the throne and from the Lamb? So the paradigm shift happens.
Now, who is the Lamb? Who is the Lamb?
This takes us back to the same soul entity as that we best know as Jesus.
Right.
So, but he doesn't come back as the Christ or the Messiah. The Messiah was here 2,000 years ago. He comes back as the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and it's just not on planet Earth. It's for the cosmos, all 10 dimensions. He now has the right to rule. That's why.
Yeah. Now, I can give you a completely different scenario that doesn't involve Nibiru, because it happened on October 13th, 2010, over New York, where our friend, the NORAD officer, the Canadian NORAD officer that you mentioned,
Stanley Fulham,
he predicted it in his book, because they told him, we're going to decloak part of the fleet of the combined Regional Galactic Governance Council over New York on October 13th, 2010. And they did that because on October 14th, they were having a meeting of the UN Outer Space Committee in New York of 2010, and they decloaked part of it, and we have pictures of New Yorkers going like this.
Yeah, it was like the first time New Yorkers looked up in 50 years.
Oh my God. Now, and then the dark minds of Hollywood, all the disinfo minds of Hollywood that are controlled by the Antichrist, namely by the Zionist bankers, Satanists, in Independence Day, they make it dark, right?
Sure.
They make the fleet dark. But what if all of a sudden the fleet worldwide decloaks itself, and guess who's the commander of the fleet? The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords.
That could very well be. Now,
and then let me just walk through the scenario.
Sure.
Because I think that that's as plausible, if not more, than an Nibiru, because, man, I've been studying Planet X Nibiru for over 40 years. That was my first book. It's not around. And I can show you that we got a fleet right out there. It's just cloaked. And I can show you pictures of it on October 13th, 2010.
Alfred, we have artificial stars that are in place. They go blink, 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 blink all night long in strobing colors.
Yeah.
And it's like, seriously.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, they're up there, and they move in synchronous orbit.
I think that a realistic scenario, as long as we're talking about upper theater events, get your popcorn ready, where all the King of Kings, all these guys are going to scurry down into the underground bases, is that the galactic fleet goes, they uncloak themselves. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords is up there, and they all scurry the underground bases. They all tremble. And meanwhile, on the surface, we surface dwellers are just partying. That's all.
It could very well be.
That to me, as an exopolitician, to me, that's the most plausible, logical thing, because they did a test run. See, I think that Stanley Fulham was a test run for the second coming. And no, really.
Yeah, I'm just analyzing that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we talked about this once before. It's as easy as just taking away the beta operating speed of our brain.
Yeah.
If we eliminated beta, Earth would change like that.
Yeah.
There would be no more war. There'd be no more conflict. We'd be working together, and we'd be working in unison. Just get rid of the beta operating speed.
Maybe the book of Revelation is all symbolic. It's not literal. Maybe it's about, yeah.
Except for certain things, Alfred. The desertification of Earth, the Gulf oil disaster, Chernobyl and Fukushima, and chemtrails are all listed in Chapter 9.
No, right. But I mean that at the same time, many of these texts have multiple layers and multiple levels.
Well,
and so it's really talking about the collective mind and the shift of state from beta to alpha.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. It can swing two different ways. One thing that we talked about is suing for peace. And what is on a positive timeline, we see the United Nations taking what appear to be steps to a positive outcome. The scripture says, however, when the nations declare peace and security, then the end will be instantly upon them, as the pangs of distress of a pregnant woman. Well, the end of what? The end of, it's still going to be an unjust rule. You're still going to have the Rothschild cabal. You're still going to have negative ETs. You're still going to have the military. They have to get rid of all of these things, and quickly, in order to avoid what's coming, because we are running out of cosmic time.
Right.
So here's the thing, Alfred, if we have it, kind of like the 100th monkey theory, we get to the point where all of a sudden there's a general consciousness that we have to work together and lay down the arms, lay down the confrontation, lay down everything that we can that is harmful to each other, and start working together. Problem solved. The situation that we see in real time is everything is fear-based. You want to know what the latest fear porn is? Go turn on CNN and see what they're pushing today.
Yeah.
It's like all it is terrorism or disaster. Theater accounts. It's all it is. It's just either that or distraction. What's happening in Hollywood?
Yeah.
So it's
which is more Satanism.
Yeah. And so it keeps us locked in this state of fear, which is just a state of mind. Fear is only as real as your imagination.
So what you're saying is that the only mechanism that's going to rid us of this, the Rothschild rot is what?
We're going to have to count on some interdimensional situation happening, a paradigm shift.
It's some kind of deep paradigm shift, that there's a frequency intervention where they cannot, there's like, their service to self cannot enter the new dimension.
Alfred, we had how many people on the panel, including yourself, the other night? 6 total?
There were 5 of us.
Okay, 5 of us? Yeah, Emily didn't make it. What was the one common denominator that we all came up with?
Well, toward the end,
we all
I had second thoughts about that, because toward the end we had truth and reconciliation. Was that it?
No, I'm thinking about the one thing that we all agreed to is that we have to have a paradigm shift to a state of love on this planet.
Right.
Regardless of what the background was, all 5 of us agreed that we need to see this planet bathed in love.
Yeah.
If everybody reached that same conclusion, you had 7 billion people
Yeah.
reach that conclusion, how hard would a paradigm shift be?
Right. From duality consciousness to unity consciousness.
Exactly.
And so, you know, the 99.99% are there, but you've got this cluster of the banking families, the Illuminati, the Coneheads, the Dracos, the this. And so is that a nut that you can bring to the table that say, are you ready to shift or not? Or are they so terminal that you got to give up on them?
Boy, Alfred, that's something that I've thought about time and time again, because at times I've actually prayed for them that they would reform themselves and become stewards of this planet and use their money for good and not harm. But I don't see anything really coming about unless there's some drastic total change.
So as above, so below, in the same way that at least the people in the Urantia book world say that Satan and Lucifer were tried and their souls were executed, were terminated because God offered them clemency, but they didn't take it at the trial. In the same way, even though the light workers were trying to offer clemency to this cluster of Illuminati banking families, the Synagogue of Satan, the Coneheads, all these people that are like the rot.
Yeah, well, they believe they can win this, and they can't.
Yeah, but if they won't do it, then the universe is just going to go. Is that it?
Time will continue. We are going to, that there's several scriptures which all pretty much say the same thing, that we're going to know that Yahweh, or that the Creator, is behind what is going on. And we are going to see some sort of an ET involvement with interdimensional. I can't say that we're going to see the mother ship come up and see the whole entire fleet. We might see balls of light zipping through this planet. And you remember when they opened up the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones, Search for the Ark, Lost Ark? They opened it up, and these entities came out of the Ark, and then all of a sudden it was just lightning bolts, just pierced everybody and melted them. It could be something similar to that. When you read the account in Exodus, the destroying angel, whatever the destroyer was, only killed the firstborn of Egypt. So,
i.e., they could come up against the Force, and they could think that they could win against the Force, and the Force could just wipe them out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
How would there's Alpha, when I had that situation right after Stanley Fulham's interview, I was bringing my son home from college, and I just set the cruise control for 63 miles an hour. I know exactly how fast I was going. I turned around, I looked up, a deer jumps out of the wood line and leaps up into the air, going across the road, and I'm heading right for it. And a blue orb appears out of nowhere, blows up like a balloon between me and the deer. The deer hits the windshield of the car, disappeared, literally disappeared. My son went back to check on the deer. We got stopped. I finally got the car stopped. He ran back to check on the deer. He said the deer got up and pranced off like it was proud. I'm trying to what was the blue orb? There's instantly, and when you see it blew up about 30 inches. You look at the impact on the windshield of the glass, and there's a 30-inch depression in the center of the glass between where the deer and I were. Or I have no explanation other than I got to see the hand of God in action.
Wow.
So, will that same? I called him George I named it George from the movie of Mice and Men.
George is a very popular name for these ET. George is also the name that the commander of the intergalactic fleet, according to Ray Koselandich, is taking.
Now, whatever it was, it saved my bacon, saved my son's bacon too, because the lead-off story on the news that was on a Friday evening, and it was Monday that you did the interview with Stanley Fulham.
Yeah.
Thursday night, I was going to release the information that I found, the 2010 to where we are now,
Yeah.
from Ezekiel. And I was told the night before Thursday night that I shouldn't do it. And I said, yeah, I know, but I have to. And it was a Friday night that a blue orb saved my bacon from getting destroyed by a flying deer. Now, the lead-off story on the news on Monday morning was a family of 3 hit a deer at 45 miles an hour. The deer went through the front windshield and out the back, put all 3 of them in the hospital. So, we're in an interdimensional battle here.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Just to get back to the 7-year period, there's a 7-year period and the 2 3.5-year periods, and something happens at the middle. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, here's the situation. We should be on a 3.5-year time frame, which started at the last general meeting of the General Assembly of the United Nations in September.
That's September 2014.
Right. That should have started the 3.5-year maximum 3.5-year countdown.
Right. So that takes you to September 2017. Add 3, so that takes you to February 2018. So what's going to happen in February 2018?
I don't know.
No, but I mean, what?
Oh.
What happens in that 3.5-year period?
Well, this starts a period which is known as the cleansing of the temple. It comes out of the book of Malachi, I believe.
Oh, I see.
And this is where now all those entities that have been destroying Earth for the last 6,000 years are going to be removed. Oh,
so that we can have a cleansing of the temple somewhere around 28.
It's not don't look for a literal temple cleansing. It's not like this is
it's kind of the
earth as the temple.
Yeah, the earth as a temple gets it's the dimensional ecology of the earth is cleaned out in kind of the lower astrals get blown out, so a lot of the demons are gone. Is that it?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
By the end of the process, yes.
Yeah.
But we don't know when the end comes.
Yeah.
And you have to go back to Matthew, the 24th chapter, in the 21st and 22nd verses, I believe it is, where Jesus talks about the great tribulation. There's something starts a great tribulation. And that's why I referenced the Nibiru event, but it may not be a Nibiru event. It could be any one of a number of things, including the Rothschilds themselves pushing the button or trying to. But something happens which causes a great tribulation, and this is a separating of mankind. This is where we kind of go our different ways. It goes on to say that it would become so bad that if it weren't for the chosen ones, no flesh would be saved. But because of the chosen ones, those days would be cut short. So that 3.5-year period, which started, we don't know when it's going to end. And that's why is it going to be the Rothschilds that start something? Is it going to be a celestial event? Is it going to be a cosmic event which hits this planet, whatever it is, those who make that shift into love won't have any problem. We have absolutely nothing to fear. We have a positive future.
Well, you see, now, the theory that I've been putting forth in the positive timeline is as follows, is as follows, that we've now shifted into a positive timeline. Mm-hmm. And that's the timeline that's ruling the time-space hologram that we're in. And all of these prophecies are actually holograms from an old timeline based on duality consciousness of I win, you lose. And they're holograms from the past, but they don't really exist now. So those are expectations from the past, but they aren't going to happen now. So there's not going to be like this great tribulation. But the issue is how we're going to get rid of the Rothschilds and rid of the rot,
Well, yeah, you see, and that's where that little That's the part that gets bad, is when they are removed. Whatever the situation is that causes their removal
I see.
is that time period of great tribulation, because it's not just the rot.
Yeah.
It's everything around the rot that
Yeah.
supports the rot.
By the way, I have some preliminary confirmation of that. For the past couple of days, I proposed in writing that in a truth, reconciliation, and restorative justice global marathon, that a quid pro quo is that the Rothschilds contribute their $100 trillion. I mean, that's just a figure that's bandied about. Their $100 trillion illicit fortune, that be contributed to humanity in reparations. And
sure. Yeah, if they did
yeah,
something like that, that would be a great first start.
Yeah. And so I've done that. And that the instant that I started doing that, I was hit with directed energy weapons, which gave me this tremendous headache. So that I knew that I'd hit a target, because I instantly was hit with directed energy weapons. And then Loren Murray, who's a great expert, told me that you get these swimmers' earplugs. And because the technology of that to give you these EMF headaches is that they send beams in through both your ears, and if they're supposed to meet inside your head, but if you plug one of the earplugs, then that blocks the technology. So anyways, for people who get these kind of headaches, but I can confirm that as soon as I started posting a quid pro quo, acting as advocate, that the Rothschilds should, as part of this process, donate. If they want to get through the eye of the needle, hey, you got to give up. You can't go take it with you. Give up their $100 trillion fortune, which is illicit anyway. Give it to humanity. They all started at peasants. They were the bowers of,
Absolutely,
someplace, some village, and they made a deal with the devil, obviously. Well, let them repent. Sure. And give their $100 trillion fortune to humanity, and let them come in as children. They enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's fine. But as soon as I proposed that in writing on my Facebook page and various groups, meow. So you can tell that, hey man, follow the money. I hit the bullseye. That's what they're so scared of, losing their money. Money, man, that's just material shit.
It's the power that goes along with it, and that's the problem, because you have, the military complexes of the world. You've got the how do you transform all these? How do you get these generals to turn around and say, okay, well, I don't want to play this game anymore. Let's go home and make peace, not war. That's the unknown, which is that center of the paradigm shift, to where we are going to know that whatever happens is going to be brought by King of Kings and Lord of Lords. They're going to have to submit. It's just that simple.
First of all, we're in a time space. We're in a time space hologram. These are all interference patterns.
Yeah.
Frequencies. I mean, you just up the frequency, and this is all gone. Poof. So it's all illusion.
Yeah,
it's about illusion.
That's the crazy thing. They want to keep the illusion going on because it's self-serving. It's a self-serving illusion.
Self-serving illusion. It's sad, really. It's pitiful.
Yeah, and so if we, what I would love to do is just to have everyone realize what's going on and say, hey, enough is enough. We need to start to love one another and come into that compliance and start our thinking over in alpha.
Yeah.
Start thinking, making that mental shift. Instead of flipping off the guy who just cut us off in the morning and saying a bunch of bad, choice words. Just back off. Come off the gas. Hey, have a good day. Relax.
So what you're saying is about 3.5 years in,
we shouldn't have any more to look. This should all be over in 3.5 years.
Yeah. So that there's about 3.5 years in. By then, there will have been some event that will have just, that core of rot.
Yeah.
The Zionist banking families, the Coneheads, the Draco, the Orion banking system, that intractable, that, no, this is a world of war, disease, crime, and poverty. It's going to stay that way.
Yeah, you can't have that anymore. Sorry.
That's going to be gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that core, that rot that is committed to that will have been deep, and that's going to be the flashpoint. And we don't know whether that's going to be a decloaking of the regional galactic fleet, and they're all going to go, fuck, pew, or something like that.
Well, when you read what it says in Revelation 19.
About pregnant women, it's going to be hard on them, head for the hills.
No, none of that. None of that. When you go to 19, this is the coming of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is when he actually shows up. It says that he's coming, and he shows up with the armies of the heavens. Armies, plural. Now, we also know that he has the immortals along with them. So we're looking at somewhere, based on the numbers out of Revelation, somewhere around 200 million plus entities coming to rescue us here on Earth.
We were just with George. This is with Ray Koselanich and Dr. Sam Muggsy. We did a show the other night. We were talking to George. He calls himself George, and he says, we're here with 6 billion. This is on the fleet. And so when you're talking about the armies of heaven and the immortals, they're already here with the armies of heaven. There's the wars going on. They're kicking the butt of all the manipulatory ETs. So all that's going down right now.
It could very well. Well, it actually started going down in 1914 off planet.
Yeah.
Probably started 1913 off planet. And essentially the Dracos and the Rebel Alliance has been in retreat. They've all been here since then. That's pretty much why the last 100 years have been as bloody as they have been.
Yeah.
Over 1 billion people have been sacrificed essentially because of war, conflict, and the things that they bring about throughout the 20th century.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're infested. There's no doubt about it. And this infestation has to be removed. So,
well, then, but to me, I mean, just now, as an exopolitician, I read Lord plus the armies of heaven. I read the uncloaking of the regional galactic fleet. That's how it could
very well be. It could very well be. It's Alfred. There's some things which weren't told to me. Some things.
No, but I mean that's why we come together. So then, when 2 or more are gathered together, then we each have a piece of the puzzle, and that's why I think that our friend. I always block on his name. What's his name again?
Stanley Fulham.
Stanley Fulham. And people can go to exopolitics.com and listen to those interviews and read those articles. I mean, they're incredible. We have it detailed, down to the T. I believe that was a decloaking of the regional galactic fleet over the city of New York on October 13, 2010, and that was a test run for the second coming.
It could very well be. Alfred, the thing that we don't know, here's the problem.
Yeah.
We are truly ignorant to identify who the good ETs and who are the bad ETs. It's like meeting a stranger for the first time. You don't know if he's someone that you need to be.
I see, because so that could have been like in Z or whatever it is. They go, and there's the bad guys underneath.
Yeah, because Project Bluebeam is based around the second coming of Christ.
I see.
So, if all of a sudden they start There was
So it could be there could be like a setup coming up.
yeah, and you see that's why there needs to be some sort of an event which takes out the United Nations and takes out the one world government and takes out
Okay,
the rulers of
so
this
you have to say something. There needs to be
some
an
event.
event
Yeah.
which takes out the United Nations. What about the Vatican?
That's going to be long gone. Religion will be done away with first.
I see.
Religion
Which takes out the United Nations and takes out the Vatican. What about the City of London? And what about Wall Street and all these banks?
Oh, that's all going to wind up going. See, it'll be an event which will collapse the system.
I see.
Remember, in 2013, remember that there was a big concern about the testing of the electric grid, and some people saying, "Oh, they're going to shut the grid off." You know, they're going to. Well, I don't know what prompted the study by the United States, but someone conducted a study to see how long the population would last if the electric grid was down, and they figured that by the end of 2 years, 90% of the population of the United States would be dead just by shutting off the electric.
Yeah. Now, I tell you what just happened. I've been given the 5-minute warning by the clock.
Okay.
But I can see that we can have an ongoing monitoring show.
Yeah, we kind of have to.
We're going to definitely have to have a show in September or as a warm-up to or following all of this, because people who are following this at the 3D level are not monitoring this at the correct level.
Absolutely.
And people who are, so good. Now, I know that there was a lot here that we intended to follow. Like you said that, when you had heard my story, it reminded you of the story of Paul, and all of that, and we didn't get to that. So why don't we, in our next installment of this ongoing interpretation of upper theater as it's going along, we can also have a thread which just monitors our two stories from back in 73 and 74 and interprets those, and then interprets the upper theater stuff. How's that?
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. We are at a Jubilee point, actually we're past a Jubilee point from where our course was set, if you want to call it that, or where we had this situation happen. And there's just so much between that we share, but from totally different levels.
Yeah.
It's like we were going this way, and then all of a sudden, turned and started working in parallel synchronization and not even knowing it, working on this problem of a positive timeline and a positive, I shouldn't say problem because it's not a problem. It will happen. It's in process. People are waking up. The more people that wake up, the more definite it becomes, the more you become aware of it. And so it will happen. It's just, how do we remove the rot?
Yeah, the rot.
Stay tuned. We'll talk about that. We'll figure it out.
And it's funny, Rothschild, rot the child, rot the Christ child.
Yeah, it's the symbology that runs around is crazy sometimes.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Do you have any final? Oh, here I am. I'm supposed to be. You're supposed to be the host. I'm supposed to.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, folks.
Alfred, we know we're headed for the final timeline.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation? What can people start to do? I think that's the main thing. What can we start?
Well, look, I can tell you what I started to do. When I've started to do this, I have let go of any earthly ambitions. I really don't have any more earthly ambitions. People have said, "Oh, don't you want to be Secretary General of the UN? Oh, don't you want to do this? Don't you want to do that?" I've let go of all of that. I just really want to be, true to myself, close to my family. I just want to watch this, and I really want to be in the service of the Christ and of Christ consciousness and live the golden rule. And and that's where I am. I guess I've just let go of any kind of earthly ambition. I just let go of it. My kingdom is not of this earth, I guess.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and I feel the same way. It's like retirement. What's that? Building my camp. You know, that's really it. We need to change our focus beyond what's real here in the 3D. I think.
Yeah.
And once we're able to do that,
Yeah.
that in a state of love, our world starts changing. And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
was important yesterday, oh, I got to get that new jet ski. Oh, I got to get the latest and greatest iPhone. Whatever the case might be, you start forgetting about that. And you start thinking about family. And that's really, I'm pretty much in the same space. This year, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have made a move off the grid. So this is going to be pretty much the last year I'm going to be.
Whoa. So we won't be able to reach you. Is that it? So Peter, this is, people, we're going to have to make this, people are going to really have to, so when is that happening?
I was hoping to have it done by September.
So you're really doing it.
Yeah.
You're walking the walk. You're not.
Absolutely. And it's not just me. It's my family.
Yeah.
Nobody. We're in basically the New York, the outskirts of the New York metropolitan area. When you turn off the electricity, I know where the people are coming. Yeah. And if they turn off the electricity, I can't grow enough in my backyard to turn around and feed my family.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but you know what? It's time to care for your family.
Yeah.
We see the biggest thing I think we have to worry about, Alfred, if there is something to worry about, not really worry, but be concerned about false flags. False flags.
Yeah.
Watch out for the false flags and start preparing to take care of your family. That's pretty much where it is.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is...
Well, it's now, in fact, I'm going to leave here and just go next door. We're having a big Easter family dinner, so
time to be with your family. We've been out this for 2.5 hours, one of our longer interviews, but boy, the information is so great.
It's great. It
absolutely is.
Well, look, do you have any words you want to leave our audience with? And
if they haven't done so already, read Letters to Earth. You Can Survive Armageddon.
Okay.
Read the Omniverse. There's a lot.
Yeah. If you haven't done so, read the Omniverse. It's coming out in December of 2015. So that's when okay.
Yeah. So, we have to do our things here, but family is number one. That's where the love starts. And you see, when this is all over, Alfred, it's really to get us back to the human family. The race is over.
Yeah.
It's over. We don't need to race anymore. We need to love. We need to be together.
Yeah.
So that's where it is. Alfred, love and blessings. Thank you for spending this time with me, and thank you for sharing the information.
Likewise.
Have a great evening and enjoy your family. Love and blessings.
Thank you.